Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card uses this new stamp set I got by Your Next Stamp called Fishy Fun. It's got a lot of really cute fish with smiley faces in it. And I'm also using this My Favorite Things background called Whimsical Waves. And then I've got my Simon Says Stamp stitched circles. So the first thing I'm going to do is arrange 3 of these circles on a piece of Nina 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch. I'm going to put them into place with some surgical tape, and then I'll run this through my Big Shot. And so I'm going to peel away the tape and take out the insides. I'm going to use both the insides and the outside. And so I'm going to take the insides, I'm going to stamp them each with a fish. Now the biggest one gets the turtle, and then the next one has a fish kind of hanging off the left side. And then for the final one, I kind of put him in the lower right hand corner just to make it a little different. So before I do anything else with these fish, I'm going to ink up the edges with some tumbled glass. I use tumbled glass when I want just a hint of color. And I'm using my ink foam applicator and I'm going around the fish, but I'm going to be careful not to color over the fish. So it's okay if it doesn't go all the way up to the fish. I'm just going to get some blue, mostly on the edge so that I get contrast when I inlay it back into the negative part of the die. And so I'm going to start my ink applicator off, and then I'm going to work on, and you can see that I kind of tap it back into the ink pad, but I don't want to get too much ink because then it could get blotchy. And it's okay that I just have my blue around the edges and there's a little bit of white around the fish because it sort of adds a glow to the fish. So I'm going to do this with all 3 of these circles, and then I'll move on to creating my sand. I'm going to be using my Snowflake paste, which is the paste I use to create snow on my Christmas cards. So as you can see, it looks like embossing paste. It has very similar texture. So I'm going to pick up some with my palette knife, the back of my palette knife. It's easier to scoop it up that way. And then I'm going to take some walnut stain ink and I'm going to mix it into my Snowflake paste. And it's going to create a brownish, tannish color to this paste. Now the first time I did this card, I created a really beautiful tan sand, and this time when I did it, I think I used a little bit too much of the walnut stain. Anyway, so you can see I put it into the color on my craft mat, and I just mixed it up really well with my palette knife. And I wish I would have left it right at this color, because the thing is it's going to dry a little bit darker, which sort of surprised me. I didn't realize that after I did the first version of the card. So anyway, so I went ahead and added some more ink, and it looks like the perfect sand color, but actually dries darker than that. So just be aware of that. Okay, so I'm just going to scoop what I have here, and I'm going to grab my turtle circle, and I'm just going to kind of swipe it along the bottom, and it will stick to the cardstock, but you do have to spread it with the palette knife, and be careful because it does spread pretty easily and it could get a little bit out of hand. And the first layer I put on was a little bit too thick, but it's okay to get it on thick because then you can always take some of it off. What you want to do is make sure that you cover up all the areas. You can see I'm using the tip of the palette knife to kind of push it up without getting it too far up. And now I'm going to scrape off a little bit of the thick layer I put on to make it a little thinner, and then I'll just run my palette knife across the bottom of the circle to smooth out my edge, because I am going to be putting this inside of the circle, the background. So this takes quite a bit of time to dry, and when it dries you'll be able to see the glitter from the Snowflake paste. You can't really see it when it's wet. But it's still wet right now. I decided to move on and do the other parts of the card. I'm going to color my fish with some Copic markers. I started with a G99 on my turtle, and I'm coloring where there's overlap of these little tiles, I guess you could say. So wherever there's overlap, there'll be shadow. So I colored it with the darker green. And now I'm just filling in all the rest with this lighter green, the G82. And so once you add those dark areas underneath that look like they're underneath, then it really gives it some dimension. Now for the outside of this shell, I'm going to use just one color, E25. I'm just going to color the whole thing all the way around. I'm not going to do 2 colors, just one. The great thing about Copic markers is that they do add beautiful color, and you don't even have to have perspective and shading and all that. You just get a nice smooth application of color. For the rest of the turtle, I'm just going to use these 2 brown colors, E34 and E31. I'm going to start with the E34 and just color the areas that I think would be a little bit darker, just on the left edge of each fin and on the bottom of his head and kind of underneath where the shell comes over. And then I'll take my E31 and just finish coloring in the whole thing. So I'm just going to be careful that I don't color in the eye or the mouth that's open. So I'm just finishing off his fins here. And that'll be it for the turtle, and I can move on to the rest of the fish. This one I'm going to color just some black and white stripes. So I'm actually just going to leave the white ones just plain old cardstock for now. And I'm going to color the rest, the 110, which is just a very solid black Copic marker. And it's great because you get really nice dark coverage of color with this marker. And then I'm adding some YG21, just kind of a bright yellow to add some interest to this fish. And then finally, I'm going to take my Wink of Stella clear pen and color over the white areas. Now, I do have a white Wink of Stella pen, but it actually looks more gold. The clear pen looks a little bit more silver, and that's why I use the clear one. So anyway, I'm going to move on to this last one, just some YR09 in some of the areas. And again, this one's going to have white stripes also. And then I'm just filling in with the YR04, it's just a lighter orange. I wanted to add a little bit of texture to my background rather than having it be plain white. So I'm inking up my Whimsical Waves with some Versamark ink, and I'm going to drop my window panel on there, and I'm going to put a piece of scratch paper over it, and I'm just going to put some pressure all over it to make sure that I get all of my stamp on my cardstock, and then I just pick it up and I like to flip it onto my table. So I'm going to cover this with some clear embossing powder. You could use white, but I think clear gives it a little bit more of a glossy finish, so I used clear. And when I used that surgical tape, it left a little bit of residue, so I just brushed off the excess powder with a paintbrush. And then I heat it to set it. And now I'm going to work on my sentiment. I just have a piece of black scratch cardstock, and I inked it up my sentiment, which comes with this Fishy Fun set with some Versamark ink, and then I white embossed it. Now I'm going to put this right next to the turtle circle. So I took the turtle circle and I put it against my sentiment, and I'm going to run it through my Big Shot like that. And then I'll put some ATG tape runner on the back, and I'll position it right there so that it kind of looks like it's right up against the edge of that circle, and it fits perfectly, and it has the stitching on it because these circles have stitching on the outside. All right, now my sand is dry, so what I'm going to do is take my card base. It's a top folding card. I'm going to make sure it's all lined up, and then I'll take a pencil and I'm going to draw these circles so I know where to put my fish circles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some tape runner on the back of each of these circles, and I'm going to place them inside my pencil circles. And you can see how the tumbled glass on the edge of these circles really makes them pop against the white background. All right, so now I'm going to put my window panel on top. I'm going to cover the whole thing with Scotch foam tape. And what I do is I generally use the big pieces first, and then I start cutting this tape. And I actually can cut it into quarters, like lengthwise. So I'm going to cut these different pieces so that I have a little bit under each different area on the outside of all these circles to make sure that the circles are popped up on all sides of the circle. So I'm going to take the release backing off, and I'm just going to line it up on top and place it right over my fish. My final detail is some glossy accents on my turtle shell. What I normally do is I kind of outline the whole thing, and then I fill it in the middle. And that is the card for today. So it's kind of hard to see with this light, but you can see it in a photo. The whimsical waves on the background really add a nice little detail to the card. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.